All right. Can you all hear me? Sound check? All right, awesome. Good evening, everyone. My name is Starr, and I'm the Director of Government Affairs for the UMBC Student Government Association, and it is my pleasure and honor to welcome you all to UMBC on behalf of our student body. Thank you all for coming out. Our students and faculty here have a history of leading the charge in the fight against climate change, and we are so pleased to have you all with us to discuss how we can work together to build Maryland's climate future. So thank you to all of our panelists for coming out tonight. So I'm going to start us off by introducing someone who really needs no introduction here at UMBC, our president, Dr. Valerie Shears Ashby. Much like Maryland, UMBC has experienced a change in leadership with President Ashby, and we could not be any luckier. One thing about President Shears Ashby is that she really listens to the students. I noticed that when I first spoke with her, she asked me about who I was, about my home, about what I wanted to see happen at UMBC, and made me feel seen. Fun fact, I noticed during that conversation, she writes down a lot of what you say, so be prepared for her to write down what you say tonight and hold you accountable. And yeah, but because President Shears Ashby listens, because she is a diligent note taker, and because of conversations like these she has with us, she knows that facing climate change is at the forefront of the minds of the students. And that's why, as we enter a critical time in the fight against climate change in Maryland, I can think of no better person to lead UMBC as we work together with you all to shape Maryland's climate policy. And with that, I introduce to you Dr. Valerie Shears Ashby.
I paid that person, whoever still left. Oh, so good to see you. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Oh, what a pleasure. Can you all hear me okay? What a pleasure. You know, who has the opportunity to wake up every day and work with students who care so much about the community and the world in which they live, and they are so unselfish in their service and leadership? That's a job, y'all. And it turns out to be president of UMBC. It's taken. So if you were looking for that job, you can't have it. You can't have it. And I'm just delighted to be here. Before I make these formal remarks, I just want to say how happy I am to be a Marylander. I'm a North Carolinian. I grew up in North Carolina. But this is the first time that I've lived outside of the state of North Carolina where I felt like I was immediately at home. I was welcomed here, not just to the UMBC campus, but to the entire state. And I live in the city of Baltimore, and I love it. And so I feel right at home. I feel like a part of this community, and I am delighted with our leadership and to be partners with our leaders on this particular topic of climate change and the environment. So now I'm going to go to my written remarks. So I just want to first, again, thank Zach for that wonderful introduction. I knew he was a student leader the first time I met him, and he started asking me, what are you going to do for UMBC? And he started going down the list of some things that had been on his mind. I love that. So welcome to all of you. Welcome to UMBC. We are honored to have you here for this particular occasion. And what a privilege it is for us to partner with Maryland Matters. I am learning about the complexities and the intricacies of how things work in the state of Maryland. And so it's a pleasure for us to be partners with Maryland Matters. I also am so happy to welcome back our Lieutenant Governor, Aruna Miller. Let's give her a round of applause. I say back because she has visited UMBC already and spent some time with our wonderful students, faculty, and staff. And so it was a pleasure to have you, and it's a pleasure to have her back. I also want to thank all of our panelists for joining us, and I'm sure you'll be formally introduced here in a moment, but just want to say thank you for being with us, being on our campus today to discuss this important topic and to participate in this forum. I also would like to thank some folks who are in the audience. I also like to thank our delegates, Sheila Ruth and Dana Stein, for joining us. Thank you. Thank you. And also I'd like to welcome the incoming head of the Public Service Public Service Commission, Fred Hoover. Welcome, welcome. And to our wonderful Student Government Association members, our MC, I've already mentioned, Zach Starr, as well as Musa Jaffrey. Where's Musa? All right, here, okay. Musa is going to be our next student body president. He was recently elected to be president of the Student Government Association, and so we are so proud of him and thank him for his leadership and his service. I believe that Musa and Zach might spend more time in Annapolis than I do. It's pretty impressive. I also want to thank our Maryland Matters partners, Josh Kurtz, who I just met here recently. Where's Josh? Oh. Welcome. So happy to have you, and also Danielle Gaines. And to everyone attending, those who are watching via live stream and those who have joined us in the audience, we are delighted to have you discuss this critical topic. I'd just say a couple more words. I joined UMBC in August, and since that time, I have witnessed firsthand from our faculty, students, and staff our commitment to sustainability and environmental protection. If you haven't been on our campus, you may not know of the outstanding research that we have in this area, but also the courses that we teach, the service that we do, the community engaged scholarship that we have. And I hope that you've had a chance to see some of the posters and see some of the wonderful work that we do here at UMBC. I'll just highlight a couple of things that I think are really critical to what we do. Our work includes our invasive species management on our campus, as well as efforts undertaken by our Office of Sustainability. And I had the opportunity actually just yesterday to meet with what we call our iCare program, which is an incredible program that is really community engaged scholarship around the environment, particularly focused around Baltimore and areas in the Baltimore community. When I tell you, you would be inspired by the scholars that we are raising that pay attention to community efforts around the environment, it is truly inspiring. And I just want to put in a plug for who UMBC is. We are a place that does inclusive excellence. This is a discipline, the environmental science and climate science, that is one of the least diverse. I'm a chemist, so I can talk trash a little bit about this. It's even less diverse than chemistry. That's one of the least diverse, and yet it affects the broadest range of diverse human beings and communities. So we have not fully brought all of the best and most diverse minds to the table, but here at UMBC, this is our focus. And so we are really proud of our students, our faculty, and our staff for the work that they do in and outside of the classroom, and also in our communities. And then finally, let me just say that I am looking forward to working with the governor, with the lieutenant governor, and with all of you on issues of sustainability and the environment. We want to be a true partner. And we also are a partner not just in this research and in the scholarship here, but also in workforce development. This is critical to us, that we are producing the next brilliant minds who will actually, Lieutenant Governor, remain in the state of Maryland to do this work. The majority of our students graduate from here and remain here to do this work. So we are just delighted to be a host. I want to thank Candace Dotson Reed. I believe that Candace works miracles and is so highly respected in the state, and is a part of she is the reason why we have this partnership and why you are here with us this evening. So thank you to Candace. And I will turn it back over to Zach. Thank you all for being here with us this evening.
All right, next, it's my pleasure to bring up Danielle Gaines from Maryland Matters to introduce our panelists. So a little bit about Danielle. She's been editor-in-chief of Maryland Matters for the past 2 years, where she covers government and politics. Before moving into an editing position, she previously covered politics and criminal justice at the Frederick News Post and the Gazette newspapers. Welcome to the stage, Danielle.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to be very brief, but I did just want to say how gratifying it is to be here with a big crowd of people who are so invested in government and in journalism and engaging in the important issues of the day. Thank you for being here. 2 years ago, we at Maryland Matters, we made a big choice. Our founding editor, Josh Kurtz, made the hard decision to step down and to go back into a position where he would focus on climate reporting and environment reporting. And I think he's done a great job. But I think that it's just been really wonderful to be a part of. I think Maryland Matters is helping to drive the conversation on some of those issues. In Annapolis, we're writing stories every day so that people can be engaged in the legislative process and make a difference in our state government and our state policies. This forum is part of that in-depth series. It's called Climate Calling. I would like to extend just a small thank you to our funders for that project, Ed Hatcher and Angie Cannon, who are here with us today. And then without further ado, I'll just briefly introduce the panelists. You'll get to know them a lot better over the course of the night tonight. And I wrote them in a different order, so I'm just gonna wing it. We have Transportation Secretary Paul Wiedefeld, Secretary of Planning Rebecca Flora, Secretary of Commerce Kevin Anderson, who I'm sharing a stage with for the second time in less than a week. The Director of the Maryland Energy Administration, Paul Pinsky. Environment Secretary Sereno McElwain. And of course, Lieutenant Governor Aruna Miller. I'm so glad to be building this community with UMBC. We're so grateful that you guys have welcomed us with open arms. I hope everyone enjoys tonight's conversation. I hope you'll find it engaging, at least partly because some of the questions have come from you. So thank you everyone for being so involved.
All right, now we're going to get into the main program, but before we do that, I am pleased to introduce our two moderators for tonight, Candace Dotson Reed, UMBC's Vice President for Government Relations and Community Affairs, the first Vice President for Government Relations and Community Affairs, by the way, and Josh Kurtz, the founding editor of Maryland Matters. Josh is a veteran chronicler of Maryland politics and government, and it is because of him that we have this excellent publication in Maryland. He's been covering the State House in 1990. He started covering the State House in 1995, which is way before I was born, so that's a long time for me, for the Gazette newspapers, and he's been writing about state and local politics ever since. Also the editor of E&E Daily, which covers energy and environmental policy on Capitol Hill, and was an editor at Roll Call, a Capitol Hill newspaper. And he's been a reporter in New Mexico, Wisconsin, and in his home state of New York. And for those who don't know, I already said it, Candace Dotson Reed is our Vice President for Government Relations and Community Affairs. She was appointed earlier this year by Dr. Ashby, and she is a UMBC alumna, so we are very proud of her. And she has served in various other roles at UMBC and in local government. And she was previously Chief of Staff to the President. And she is literally the glue that holds this university together. She's been a great partner in the SGA's work with government affairs and wasted no time getting us up to speed with her projects when I first met her. Our community could have no better person to advocate for us before the government, and we are just so privileged to have her with us. Simply put, without Candace, tonight's event would not be happening. So, Candace Dotson Reed, Josh Kurtz, take it away.
Hi. Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. We're so excited to be here and so grateful to see so many of you out here. We especially appreciate the Moore administration's willingness to participate. So thank you to you all. As Danielle mentioned, this forum grew out of our Climate Calling project, which is now almost 2 years old. And, not only has it produced a bunch of in-depth stories looking at what Maryland needs to do to become a leader on climate policy and some of the obstacles that the state faces, but we've tried to do some public events too. So last year, for example, we held two forums on different college campuses on climate with the Democratic candidates for governor. So this seems like a pretty good extension of that, and so we're excited for the opportunity to do it. I also need to just thank Angie Cannon and Ed Hatcher for their support for this and for all our endeavors, so thank you. They are passionate environmentalists, and that's one of the reasons why we're here. So thank you to them, and again to all of you for participating. So I'm turning things over briefly to Candace, who not only is a VP and a VIP here on this campus, but she's someone I know as one of the smartest people when it comes to Maryland politics and policy. And she's also very passionate about climate change, and so a perfect partner for us on this maiden voyage here at UMBC. So after Candace says a quick hello, I'll be back with a couple of quick ground rules, and then we'll get the conversation started. So thank you.
Thank you, Josh, and thank you, everyone. You all are making me blush. I'm like, oh my goodness. I really appreciate this. We've known each other for a while, and I've always been grateful for all that you and Maryland Matters do to ensure the public is informed on the important topics in Maryland. And I thoroughly appreciate that you're a smart policy wonk, so thank you for partnering with us. Welcome to UMBC, everyone. As was mentioned, I'm Candace Dotson Reed. I also want to thank Zach for those kind remarks. I did not have anything to do with his part of the script, just for the record. Thank you for that. It is a joy to work closely with students, faculty, and staff at UMBC as we look to address one of the most pressing issues of our time. It will take all of us as we partner with government, universities, the private sector, philanthropy, media, and beyond to address this crisis. And we know that universities play such a huge role in this space. As it was mentioned, in addition to Zach, we've been joined by our brand new, as of last night, Student Government Association President, Musa Jaffrey, who you will hear from later as he helps moderate the Q&A from the audience with Zach. Thank you again to Lieutenant Governor Miller and members of the Moore-Miller administration. We are so grateful for your time. Thank you, President Shears Ashby and members of the UMBC community for your support. Thank you to the amazing planning committee and tech team. Please raise your hand if you're on the teams, the tech and planning team. We honestly could not do any of this without you. And thank you to the members of the larger community in Maryland. We appreciate you taking the time to join us tonight. And now what you've been waiting for. Josh.
So we've envisioned tonight as a conversation. We've come up with some of the questions on our own, but a lot of them come from you and the audience when you signed up to attend. We're going to start with a quick icebreaker for each of the panelists, and then we'll ask some individual questions of the panel to sort of get a sense of the Moore administration's climate agenda and the role each agency plays in the climate fight. But we're not going to be rigid with rules here, and if I'm asking a question of Secretary Anderson, but Secretary Flora wants to jump in, I mean, we would welcome that. This isn't going to be like a candidate forum where we've got a clock and we're going to tell you to stop. But we do want to have as freewheeling a conversation as possible, so we're hoping we can keep each answer to maybe no more than 2 minutes. But again, we'll be flexible. After Candace and I ask some questions, we'll then turn things over to you all in the audience, and our student leaders will run around the room with a mic. So I hope that makes sense. I think it'll be fun. So let's start with a fun icebreaker that tells us a little something about each of you. And I guess we can start with Governor Miller and move down the line. So here we are at a university campus. If you could be a college professor, what kind of obscure college-level course would you teach? And is there a mic? What's the? Oh, there. Yeah, you're going to have to share mics, I think, some of you.
Well, Josh, thank you for that question. And to everyone that is here, thank you so much for being here. President Ashby, thank you. The fact that you're here. And can I just point out that she's the first female president of UMBC, right? Yes. Yeah. To Zach and is it Louisa? Musa. Okay, I just want to say thank you so much for your leadership here as well. And Candace, Josh, to Maryland Matters, to everyone, thank you. So what kind of class would I teach if I was a professor? You know, I think really I would want to teach a class about the mind, body, soul, spirit connection. I think there seems to be such a disconnect in the world right now between these three elements, and it's so important to bring it all together, because if you don't have mental health, spiritual health, you know, physical health all combined together, it's really hard to bounce off and learn new things and to do greater things in the world. So I think that's what I would teach if I could teach anything that I wanted. Thank you.
Let's go down the line.
Don't know if I can top that one. Wow, I was going to be very simple, but now I have to step up my game, Lieutenant Governor. Well, it's good to see all of you. Let's see, if I had to teach a course here, it would be a course on leadership. And I think it starts at this level, at the college level, and it's missed sometimes. A lot of people, like yourself, a lot of students will end up being leaders. And I have a passion for leadership, so I would teach you the difference between moving from technical expert to a manager and to leadership. They are totally different skills. So that's what I would teach.
No surprises here. I think I would want to teach public policy from a class and racial perspective, a progressive perspective. It'd almost be like how to make vegan sausage. You know, they talk about making legislation is watching sausage being made. We might do a variation on a theme there.
Thanks, Paul. I had a second to think about it, but I probably would title the course Industrial Sociology. It would be, you know, centered on the tenets of how our mechanical and capital and industrial systems have an ultimate effect on the way we think and the way we behave. So it's connecting, you know, what I've called to be our great machine of capitalism and production, and yet trying to figure out and see how and why we get the unintended consequences and what may need to be tweaked in that. So that's obscure.
I'm good. Going. Hi. Hi, everyone. Great to be here with you all. And boy, that's a tough question. It keeps getting tougher as we go down the line. But I think it would be around public discourse, learning how to have better conversations, to share ideas without people feeling defensive about that. And I'm going to do a shout out to the group I talked to over here. Tell me again, what was the name of your course or your department?
Center for Democracy and Civic Life.
I loved it. Thank you, because I think that's what it's about. Is how do we learn to talk to each other in a very, you know, I think open, honest way without taking offense. So that's where I would come from, and I think you stimulated that thought. So thank you all at that table.
Good evening, and thank you for inviting us. I think the question was an obscure course, right? Okay. So mine is more along the difference between the Einstein dilemma and making the perfect paella. So this is a very very sophisticated, smart group, and I know what you all know what that means, the Einstein dilemma. You can figure it out for me, but the paella is a little bit harder.
I love it.
That's so good. That's why we asked this question. Lieutenant Governor Miller, the first question is for you.
Sure.
You were recently at Harvard for their Climate Action Week talking about 21st century climate solutions. Could you talk with us a little bit about that discussion and give us an update on some of the administration's early climate achievements?
Yes, thank you very much, Candace. So yes, I was at Harvard University earlier this week, and it was so wonderful, much like the students here today, how much they are thinking about the future ahead, but what we need to do today to get that started. So I believe it was one of the first climate action forums that they had, and they had a great panel of speakers there, including the former First Lady, of Costa Rica. And she talked about what they did in Costa Rica, as well as a undersecretary of energy that also came to speak. So one, I think it was extremely gratifying to see young people engaged and so concerned about our climate action, not just climate action, but environmental justice that goes along with it. And they understood, just like we understand, that it is no one entity that is going to come up with the solutions of the future to address climate change, that it's going to take government, federal, state, and local entities. It's going to take private industry, NGOs, nonprofit, community activists, as well as individuals. Everyone has a role in addressing climate change, and that's what we talked about. What are the different ways in which all these entities can work together, and how can we work individually? Look, as individuals, I love it as students that you're talking about this. One of the most important things is to be aware that this is happening. It is an existential threat that we need to act with a sense of urgency. And everybody has a part, right? So you can go ahead, not only raise awareness, which you're doing by having great forums like this tonight, but also what are you doing at home? I know in our family, we have a plant-based diet that we follow. We do composting at home. We do recycling. So we try to do whatever we can individually. But then there comes the whole of it when we all come together. So one question that was posed for me was, what do you see as the biggest challenge as we move forward? And I said, well, one of the biggest challenges is Maryland is going to be a leader in climate change, and we're doing that with the Moore-Miller administration. But if the neighboring states around us are not on the same level playing field as we are, that's a problem. You know, if I had to make an analogy, it's like we have a baseball game, you have a great pitcher and you have a great, outfielder. That's great. But if the rest of the players are not doing their part, we're only as strong as our weakest player. So, that's a concern. But the good part about it is that at the national level, President Biden has taken a strong stance on climate change, right? Putting the largest amount of funding toward climate change with the Inflation Reduction Act, and also with Justice 40, where 40% of funding for any of the agencies are going to be focused on our marginalized communities that have been overlooked and underserved in the past years. And that's a great tone that is being set at the federal level that's going to trickle down to all the other states. So here in Maryland, we absolutely see this as an opportunity. It's a crisis, but it's also an opportunity to get into the green economy. And we have so many companies that are already working towards that we're very proud of. I don't know if you all know, but in Washington County, in Hagerstown, we have a Volvo plant that is actually building and manufacturing heavy-duty trucks that are net zero emission. That's what they're going to create, which is really exciting. And then in Prince George's County, we have another company called Blink that's doing the EV infrastructure. They've already gotten contracts with our U.S. Post Office, and I think they're going to have like 50,000 EV sites that they're going to be building around the nation. So this is really an exciting opportunity for us to be ahead of the game, get into the green economy, create jobs, and at the same time save our planet. Because there's nothing we want to do more than protect our planet for the younger generation that's going to be inheriting it. We owe that to you. So thank you.
Thank you. I dare say you anticipated some of our questions already, but that's okay. So the next question is for Secretary McElwain. So you worked for the federal government for a long time. You spent the last 4 years of your career working for the California state government, a recognized world leader in climate policy and innovation. So I'm wondering what your expectations were coming back to Maryland as far as kind of the state's commitment to combating climate change, and how have those expectations lined up with the reality of what you've found so far?
Oh, that's a great question. Yes, I did come from California. in January, but I just want to make it clear, this is home for me. Yes, thank you. I grew up in this area, spent 14 years in Maryland and my entire life in Virginia, besides that 14 years. So in California, working for the California Environmental Protection Agency, and when I knew I was coming here for the secretary job of environment, I was curious of just how bold is Maryland. And when I got here and I started, well, first when I read the Climate Solutions Now Act, I'm looking at him for a reason. When I read that and I saw all the things that the Maryland Department of the Environment was doing, I was extremely surprised and happy at the same time, because although a lot of people say, and it's true in some ways, California is leading, Maryland is actually the leader. That's what I learned. The goals that we have in the Climate Solutions Now Act, 60% greenhouse gas reduction by 2035, we did not have that in California. We weren't that bold. So I want to make it clear, I was surprised, happily surprised, happy to be a part of the solution. But where do we go now? Now is the time for us right now is to think about how do we meet those goals. That's where we are, and we will meet them. We will be bolder. We have to start thinking about how are we going to implement the extremely ambitious goals that we have, but we will. So I was happy to get here and learn about the fact that Maryland is actually the leader in climate change.
Secretary Wiedefeld, this question is for you. What lessons have you taken from your time leading the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority that could help the state build a sound transit system in the Baltimore area?
Thank you. Just for everyone's, I was at Metro for 8 years, so yeah, I was recently there. First and foremost, we have a great system in Baltimore with the MTA and with the MARC system that we do provide. So I think that we have a good system to start from, but we need to build out the system, similar to what you see in Washington, and the Red Line's a good example of that, and it's a priority for the governor and the lieutenant governor to do. And then to look at other corridors throughout the city, and actually throughout the state. Southern Maryland, for instance, has a light rail busway that they're thinking about, obviously Montgomery, Prince George's County, other counties. So we have to think of it holistically. I think we're positioned probably better than any other state because we're a multimodal transportation department with a multimodal transportation funding source. So that gives us a leg up on a lot of other states. And the other biggest thing I've learned is we got to compete really well for federal money, because at the end of the day, it's going to take a lot of federal money to do some of the work we're doing.
Next question is for Planning Secretary Flora. It's a question about sort of land use and planning. And since most of those decisions are made at the local level, how do you kind of view the state's role in setting planning goals and guidelines? And how do you advance these without appearing to have a heavy hand that's superseding what the locals are doing? And what can you do to help ensure that local governments are making sound choices on climate and the environment? Nothing too complicated.
Great question. Any ideas out there? Anyone have an idea? No, I think it gets back to a few of the other comments of we have to model good behavior. So whether it's to our neighboring states or others, I think by modeling good behavior, by showing leadership, I think at the state level of decision making, we are actually, I think, creating hopefully paths forward, because this is not easy stuff, and it is comprehensive, and it crosses so many different aspects of the work we do. And so I also like to use the term connect the dots, because I think sometimes this whole topic is hard for people to find relevance to them and to their community, and setting goals far out. don't answer the question of how am I feeding my family today, or how am I going to get to work today because my car broke down, the transit system is late. There's those basic everyday questions. And so I'm taking your question and twisting it a little bit because it still gets back to how do we make it relevant. So I think we can do a lot of that, yes, in showing good land use planning. And what I really want to do at the Department of Planning is more scenario planning, so we can actually show what will happen under different scenarios. I think we have to do more visualization. Quite frankly, we have too many plans. A lot of words that say a lot of things, but what are the outcomes and the impacts? So I would like to use more visualization tools. I saw some great work being done by the students here. We need that kind of talent out there to help communities really understand, whoa, wait a minute, we're all talking about the same thing. Draw me a picture, and then everybody can say, yes, that's what I want. If you write a big, long document, they get lost. I mean, I get lost sometimes after the first few pages. And so I think it goes back to that model good behavior, help with tools and techniques, use all the wonderful tools and models that we have. And we're dealing with counties that don't have a planning office at all, to counties like Montgomery County and others who they have departments bigger than mine. And so we have to also come to where people are at on that spectrum, and I think really talk to what matters to them and help them find their path forward for how this can be relevant to their citizens, and find out how to help them connect those dots and why this is important. Because sometimes I think we get too caught up in the numbers and lose track of how is this going to make your life different, or how is your life going to be affected. When we look at scenarios and visualize, we can help folks do that. So I'll stop there because I could go on and on and on, but I think that was my 2 minutes, so we'll stop there.
Thank you. Secretary Anderson, we heard a little bit from the Lieutenant Governor about the types of businesses that are here now. What is the state doing to promote green energy and clean tech businesses that are already here, and what is the state doing to attract more of them?
Sure. Thanks so much, Candace. And I think you heard a common theme in what the governor and the lieutenant governor are really taking a strong position. It's about being intentional and communicating really clearly. The business community can be really, really easy to work with once they know what you're doing and once they know how to prepare and get ready for. And I think that clarity, as you can see, has just done us a world of good things, because we're already attracting businesses. We already have companies established here ready to build turbines, ready to build monopiles for our offshore wind opportunity, ready to put cable underneath the sea and the ocean in order for us to continue to build. Another important piece is that, and again in the communication area, we've been really intentional at the Department of Commerce. We've established a very, very clear clean energy position, or an ombudsman, if you would, to make sure that they can communicate when they come in how we're going to work together and what we're going to do to work together as partners, to be comprehensive about the plans and the thoughts. I mean, you guys, know, when you're running a business, no matter where it is, you got to always be conscious of the bottom line. That's what our system requires. We live on a quarterly reporting basis, and they have to know and understand how they need to run their business in order to interact. And so those are the things that we're being very, very intentional about, and I think are being very helpful. One other big piece was that, and we communicated to the world in a great way, we got a piece of legislation passed this year called the Build Our Future Grant Fund. It is absolutely fantastic because we've communicated to businesses that can be used for a number of opportunities. It's almost a wide open opportunity where we can have conversations about supporting businesses, making sure our ecosystem gets productive, and we invite the whole business and the industry of offshore wind and other clean energy opportunities. And I think that's so important. And you hear the common theme. You heard the Lieutenant Governor talk about us being a leader, Secretary McElwain talking about us being bold. And when we get into that position, the businesses find out, communities find out, and the world finds out, well, here's where Maryland is, and here's what we're doing, and here's how you can do business. And I think it's just extremely, extremely important. So I think that's what we're doing in the business space. And once again, Maryland's leading. We are leading.
Next question is for Director Pinsky from the Maryland Energy Administration. And probably most of you out here know that he was, until the end of the year, last year, Senator Pinsky, and one of the great leaders in the legislature on environmental policy, among many other things. And so it seems to me that everybody's been talking about kind of being bold in government. And I would have to say, with all due respect, that you're probably heading an agency that, at least for the last 8 years, wasn't very bold, and and that needed kind of a dramatic course correction after 8 years of a Republican governor. So how do you do that, and how do you make the Maryland Energy Administration more proactive on climate? And if you want to kiss up to your bosses, I mean, how do you compare the Moore administration, what you're seeing with what you saw in the Hogan administration? But talk about your agency first a little bit.
Josh, I spent 8 years trashing the former administration, so I think people know where I stand on that. I made a decision to move from legislating to implementing. Now, it's important to understand that I'm implementing in the Department of Energy. So the major task of implementation of the Climate Solutions Bill that I know fairly well falls on my good secretary here, where they have to implement it, where the rubber's going to meet the road. I mean, some of the bill is sort of conceptual. So she's carrying the load of what the legislature did, and many of you as advocates did for 2.5 years. That's going to be really the crucible, because it's going to be turned into real practical implementation and practices. And some people won't be happy, some will be happy. But you can't leave it at the ephemeral level. Now we have to turn it into action. But Josh, it does give me a chance to implement. And the last 8 years, we have a lot of great people working in our agency who are giving money to great projects on solar, on wind, on geothermal. They've done a terrific job. And I've been encouraging them to, if there have been any blinders on, to take them off and be bold. I didn't come there to blow up the place, but I want us to take the initiative. So, it's been 14 or however many weeks it's been, but who's counting? And the governor about a month ago announced that we are expanding our commitment to offshore wind from 2.2 or 2.5 gigawatts to 8.5 gigawatts, and the legislature, thank you, also passed an important bill saying the same thing. We are working with the Department of Commerce as well to bring the supply chain, not just to provide materials for Maryland, but along the whole Eastern Seaboard, the Atlantic, because once this takes off, it's going to take off. Now, that being said, the inflation, the economy of the last 18 months have slowed things down, to be frank with you. But anyway, we have about 2.2 gigawatts committed from two offshore wind developers. We want to build that. Hopefully we can get started in 2 years and take a couple years to build it, and so people can actually see it. It's not a concept. They can see the turbines running. There are a couple off of Rhode Island, Block Island. They're building in Massachusetts. We want to be in that queue as soon as possible. So that's one area we've been working in. Solar. The Renewable Portfolio Bill has a carve out for solar. We're supposed to have 14%. We're not there yet. We're not close. So I've been meeting with people, and there's what's called utility scale, the big farms of many, many panels, 2 megawatts or greater, and then you've got your rooftop. And we're going to need all of that. I mean, to meet our goals, we're going to need that plus other things and new technologies. And to be frank with you, there are some people who don't like these big solar farms. They think they're an eyesore. They think it might take agricultural land. And so getting back to having conversations that you've heard about, we need to do that with people who have hesitancy. and there's been a debate as to who has the final authority on planning. Is it the state or the county? So there are challenges all the way along. And there's some who don't want to move to new technology. But I would say this, the Climate Solutions Now Act calls for the 60% reduction. If you're reducing greenhouse gases and getting away from fossil fuels, you've got to replace it with something. And that means you have to create more clean energy. Geothermal, which I never knew a lot about, but where you put wells in the ground, because the ground, if you go down 18 or 24 inches, is always 55 degrees, so you don't have to cool it except to 68 or 70 degrees. You're saving a lot of energy. Moving to the use of heat pumps rather than gas and oil. There's a whole spectrum of initiatives we have to take and be bolder. And the governor, besides what the legislature did a year and a half ago on the Climate Solutions Bill, has called for 100% clean energy by 2035. So these two things work in tandem. They're very symbiotic. And we have to move on both. And it won't be easy. I'll be the first, and he might criticize me, but it's going to be a challenge. And there are going to be some sectors that are not going to be as excited because it might affect some bottom lines. But Maryland is in a position to be a leader, as you've heard from everyone up here, in both areas. Getting the amount of solar we need, getting the offshore wind built, looking for storage. Offshore wind can create energy, but it might not be used at the same time, or a few days later, there are no winds, or with solar, there's shade or clouds. So the key issue of creating new storage that will last a long time to utilize that energy at another time is another challenge. And I can tell you at the University of Maryland, at Hopkins, there are departments that are doing this. They are encouraging post-grad students to come up with new technologies, and their organization is actually funding them to come up with these technologies that can become multi-million-dollar businesses. So, as was said, there are some challenges, but there are also opportunities, and hopefully in my role with the Department of Energy Administration, I can help fulfill that.
Thank you. Secretary Wiedefeld, you talked a little bit about the need for federal funding and partnerships with the federal government. One of the big things that I think people in this crowd would be interested in hearing is about any attempts to revive the Red Line Transit project in Baltimore.
Yes, again, it is number one priority, I believe, for the administration to get that project moving. We have a process, unfortunately, we have to go through that will take some time. That project was, as you know, pulled almost 9 years ago. And by doing that, some things have changed in terms of the data that supported the projects that we have to go back out. Some land use have changed. So we'll do that, and hopefully we can do that with what we call supplemental environmental document and not have to start all over. But there's no doubt the need for the project is there. The support for it is there in the community. I've reached out to a number of stakeholders already, and they're all behind it. Now it's basically creating the mechanism to get it built as quickly as we can. And that's really going to be the large focus of my time for the next few years, for sure.
Thank you. This is kind of a cosmic question, and I'll ask it of Lieutenant Governor Miller, but if others want to jump in, they should feel free. And the first half of the question, someone in the audience wondered about, but I kind of decided to turn it around too. Has the administration calculated yet what the total cost of achieving all its climate goals might be? And conversely, has it calculated the cost of not achieving its climate goals? And do folks in the administration, I know they do sometimes at the federal level, talk about the social cost of carbon?
Thank you for that question, Josh. The cost of climate change and what we're going to do versus if we don't do anything. Well, I can tell you if we don't do anything, that the cost is going to be so impactful, right, to our health, to the health of individuals, to the health of our climate as well. I think we all probably agree in this room that climate change is an existential threat that you've heard over and over during the night here, and we need to do something about that. Now, what that exact number is, I don't know that right now because it is so vast what needs to be done. So I think the most important thing that we should be looking at right now is, and Administrator Pinsky already talked about it, that there's already goals out there in order to have clean energy, and we're also trying to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 60% by 2031 and hopefully 100% by 2045. So we have goals. They're bold, they're aggressive, but we need to be like that in order to be able to reach those goals. It's going to take a collective effort here. And I have to say that we in the Moore-Miller administration are so proud of the secretaries and the administrator that is here today. We believe we have the best and the brightest leaders championing climate change and what we can do about it. And we have instructed every one of our secretaries that everything that they do needs to be looked through the lens of climate as well as justice, right, and equity. So those are the ways in which we're going to be focusing as we move forward. But again, it's really hard to give a number, Josh, because again, it's such a huge, vast undertaking here to address climate change. But again, working with others, identifying how we can get to that place, whether it's through clean energy, offshore wind, to hydroelectric, to solar, all these methodologies that we can use. And I think, in the end, it's going to cost, but it's also going to create a whole new ecosystem of companies that are out there, create jobs, create new emerging technologies where we can be the leader. And I think that's the most important thing that we should be heading toward. Thank you. I don't know if anybody, yeah.
Go ahead. You want to go first? I'll go. Okay. I used to have this debate with people in the green building field, which I led for quite some time. And it all depends. And it really comes down to the first strategy. But we unfortunately don't have a good economic system for valuation of natural capital or human health or, the whole list of realities that I think come with not doing this. And we as a society, and maybe that's something Maryland could think about, is really ensuring that other side of the equation in the balance sheet is not forgotten about, because it's so easy. People are, quickly dismiss that valuation of those types of factors. And then I think on the other side of the equation, in terms of the strategies, this is such a win-win, but we are not doing a good job translating that. And I think, that's where I believe, and I'm so thrilled to be part of this cabinet, this cross-disciplinary approach to how we're doing this, because as it was stated earlier, we can't do this. I mean, this can't all be on Secretary McElhaney. We have to do this in a very comprehensive way, or we will lose. And so we have to look at solutions that have multiplier benefits. So every single aspect of, whether it be the red line and what goes with that in terms of the TOD factor, the commerce factor, that multiplier impact has to be part of that equation. And so this is a particular aspect of this topic that I love getting into, because I've had it debated and I've won in the past. And so we're going to win on this one too.
If I could. I'm sorry, Kevin.
I just wanted to quickly follow up and support it. Josh, on the backside, I think the opportunity and what we're talking about is just investment. And you got to make a commitment. And I think, governments and we can go wrong if we go and then we don't go completely committed and completely invested in making sure that we make great progress and set a goal to get to the end. One of the biggest opportunities as we look at the investment in clean energy and leading, and I was just so fascinated about, the thought right now as we develop, clean energy and the opportunities on the eastern seaboard, the thought is that there's going to be a need from Maine all the way down to South Carolina. And when we're talking about logistics and where our opportunity is, guess where the midpoint is between Maine and South Carolina? You got it. And that's where we're going to be, and that's just a big opportunity that we're able to grow and on the backside be able to capture revenues and to be able to be a leader in that space to offset, when some of that opportunity comes. So with risk comes the opportunity, and then you make the investment. So I use a little quick term, no risk it, no biscuit. And these are some kinds of the things that we need to do when we're trying to be a leader. So I just wanted to throw that out.
Yeah, very briefly, it's hard to quantify the cost until you have a plan, because you don't know what the practices and policies will be. So whether it's on energy, what is our concrete plan for expanding energy and clean energy? It's hard to figure out the cost, and I'm sure the same is true with Secretary McElwain. Until their plan is completed this year, you don't know the concrete application and what those costs are. So, I think we're hoping, and I'm sure Kevin is, the more businesses we attract, you broaden your tax base, and the less pressure it puts on the populace at large. And Josh, I guess I'm going to come back to what you talked about a while ago. For the last 8 years, much of government has been hollowed out. Each agency was short-staffed, fewer people on oversight or enforcement, and a little bit of a distrust in government. And there was not a hue and cry to we need to invest in government to make sure things work. So we've got to counter that kind of culture that we unfortunately have experienced here in the state. So one, it's hard, as was said by the Lieutenant Governor, we don't have those numbers yet. Look, they might be worrisome and a little scary to people, and the governor, Lieutenant Governor, and the head of Commerce are going to have to figure out how much we can broaden the tax base with new jobs and new manufacturing, and how much other parts of that needed revenue will fall elsewhere. So I think there are multiple parts to it, and we have to change also the culture of people caring about government, investing in government, understanding government can do good things for the public, for the people, particularly on long-range challenges like climate change.
And I'll just end by saying, when we're trying to get to 60% by 2031, it's, even though it's going to cost money to do all of the implementation that we need to do, we're also creating jobs. So there's job growth and GDP growth. So there's a cost up front, there's an investment up front, but there's a whole lot of winning at the end of that investment.
Thank you all for that. I'm watching our time, and I realize we're going to go to the audience Q&A in a minute, but in addition to our president and students, I also have faculty members and our director, and our vice president, of research here, so I have to ask this question before we go there. And this is for Director Pinsky. The MEA distributes a lot of grant money. How do you work to ensure that the monies are distributed fairly and equitably? And what grant funding opportunities are there for universities to conduct research on climate change?
Thank you for the question. And before I answer, I must say we hadn't met, but last Thursday night I was with the treasurer of the state of Maryland, and she had wonderful things to say about the vice president, who I hadn't yet met, and 6 days later I get to meet you. So
I appreciate that. Thank you.
That's Treasurer Lehrman.
Comptroller, yes, thanks.
We do give out money. It comes from RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. We do it in multiple areas. I have directed our department. They already care, but I said, look, we have to use we have to use two different lenses. One, we have to use the lens of Justice 40. It's been way too long that communities have been left behind, consciously or unconsciously. That can be another forum or debate, whether it was conscious or unconscious. But our poor communities, our black and brown communities, have not had the investment they've needed. We have a number of nonprofits that are trying to give support in Delegate Stein's other life. He's doing just that in Baltimore, trying to help with energy efficiency and weatherization in some of our working class and poor communities. So there are folks doing that. We are spending most of our money either on energy efficiency or on expanding clean energy. Like I said, solar. There's one thing we spend money on is community solar. You know, a lot of people rent, okay? They don't have a detached home or even a row house. They can put solar on the roof. But they should have an opportunity to be part of this transformation. And there's something called community solar, which can be in a field, a brown field, or on a large warehouse roof that they can invest in. And after the initial outlay, they will get credit for their bill, and hopefully it would take care of their whole electric bill. So there are a lot of initiatives out there that we're trying to ensure go across the state. Obviously, there's a great need in the Baltimore-Washington corridor. We want to make sure in Garrett County and in Cecil County and in Somerset County, they get some of the benefits of this. So I think last year we gave out, I want to say $65 million in grants, hundreds of grants. And we have a large number of people who they review the grants, and then they have to track the money because it's public money. You know, we don't want it misspent. We want to be accountable to the public. You know, and a lot of that money is from companies who are members of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. So, and the second lens, one is the Justice 40 or the environmental justice, however you want to shape it or frame it. The other, in the past, we talked about clean energy and energy efficiency. I've shared with the department, we have to start shifting that to greenhouse gas reductions. We got to be much more explicit. I don't want to be too nuanced. But if our goal is to reduce greenhouse gas, that should drive what we're doing. And, you know, we should be able to compare apples to apples, not apples to oranges. And just because some group has gotten it in the past doesn't mean they get it in the future. And I had a conversation with Delegate Stein, and we want to have more nonprofits that have roots in the community, in the working class, the black and brown communities, because there's distrust. You've been reading in the papers how there are third parties that go around the streets saying, I'm going to sell you energy, and they're just hustling. You know, the Public Service Commission actually just came out and said this is outrageous, and they knocked a few firms out of the business. So again, this gets back to the question of trusting in government and having roots in the community, whether it's West Baltimore or Prince George's County or even East Montgomery County. So there's a lot of work to be done. We got to, and you know, I shared with my staff, I said, look, we can't rely on the people and the groups and the nonprofits that are out there. We might have to go and like beat the bushes and help encourage more people to get into this. Maybe there's a nonprofit, a church, a community group that has great roots but haven't worked in clean energy. That means we have to help train them and give them support, and I appreciate Dana Stein offering to do that with his organization. So again, I think it's another example. It's not an easy road. There are challenges, but there are also a lot of opportunities, and hopefully this time we do it right.
Thank you. So time is flying here. We would like to offer you all the opportunity to ask some questions, and our student leaders here, Musa and Zach, have mobile mics, and if you want to just raise your hand, they will find you. And just a reminder that we really want to, you know, this is a conversation about climate and the environment, so please limit your questions to that space, please. But take it away, or, you know, and if there's nothing, we can keep going. So.
Okay. So Musa and I are going to ask the first two questions. My question is for Secretary Whitfield. I come from Pasadena, Maryland, which is a community of tens of thousands with very little public transportation. Cars are some of the biggest polluters in our state. So what is your plan to bring kind of green public transit to communities that really don't have much right now?
A good question, and it's one that we're facing throughout the state, to be frank, because in more urban areas, it's easier, obviously, with the densities to serve with transit. In less dense areas, it's much harder. So we had to focus on sort of smaller types of bites at the apple, and not necessarily think we have to run large vehicles, for instance, in some of those facilities. I think there's opportunities to work with businesses, community groups, to offer, sort of core basic services at a minimum, and then really readjust some of the priorities and how we spend our dollars, particularly between the highway market and the transit market, to serve some of those needs.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I have a question for the general panel, and that's about how does diversity, equity, and inclusion factor into your larger work you do on climate action?
Can you repeat that again, please?
Yeah.
How does diversity, equity, and inclusion factor into the larger work you do on climate action?
Factor into the lives.
Into the work you're doing on climate action, into the work you're doing.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion, how it impacts climate
Yes.
change?
Or how it impacts
Our
your work.
efforts?
Yeah.
Oh, so equity and inclusion, diversity, all the above is critical. That's at the forefront of what we're doing when it comes to all of our climate initiatives. So there's been a lot of wrong done in the country and in Maryland and just across really everywhere. So everything that we're doing in this new administration, and particularly at the Maryland Department of the Environment, we are highlighting equity and inclusion. We're including all communities and all the decisions that we're making, including permitting decisions. So we want all voices heard. We're having listening sessions throughout the communities because I want to hear. I want to hear what people are saying. And as I've said to my agency, we're moving from rhetoric to results. So it matters now.
Thank you for that question. So I can tell you in the Moore-Miller administration how we're incorporating equity, inclusion, and diversity. Number one, we have currently the most diverse cabinet ever in Maryland's history, with 50% of our cabinet secretaries being people of color, almost 50% of our cabinet secretaries women, and 29% women of color. So right there, we've started at the top, right? Because it's important not just to have the diversity of our community at the table, but you need to have them be head of the table, right? Be part of the decision-making process. And two, Moore-Miller administration is meeting people where they are. In the past, cabinet secretary meetings used to be held primarily in Annapolis in a closed room. But you know what? We're going to every single county to hear what the community needs are, to be there, to be closer to them, because we believe that those closest to the challenge are closest to the solution. So that's how we're bringing them into adding diversity, equity, and inclusion. Thank you.
Hi, hello. My name is Laura Allen, and I'm an incoming postdoctoral researcher here at the Erickson School of Aging Studies. And I just have a piggyback question on this DEI question, because that is something that is, as you can see, very important to us here at UMBC. I think sometimes we can forget about the generational side of this issue as well. Many older adults and older Marylanders in particular are disproportionately impacted by climate change and related natural disasters. And so my question to the panel is, in what ways can we look at this issue from a generational lens? In addition to a diversity lens, and how can and how do older and younger generations work together to achieve the Miller-Moore administration's priorities? Thank you.
I'll try that one. The aging population is a part of the solution. I'm in that group, by the way. So I'm making sure the climate initiatives are addressing my old needs here. But on a serious note, I haven't started thinking about that in particular here, but I have worked on a master aging plan in California, and it was very serious. And I hope that we can bring some of those ideas here. So for example, we have the aging population in terms of senior citizen homes. And so what we did there is invested in shuttle transportation, right? Electric shuttle transportation. So we're focusing on those particular communities and age group. We also have had in California, they still have, but I'm not there. Thank goodness I'm here. But there's a lot of natural disasters. And so we created this clean center where if the air is so polluted from fires, then we have these centers we created where the older population can go there and breathe air, right? We also replace filters in those homes and make sure that they were safe. And so those are some of the things that I plan to look at here as secretary, ensuring that we're including equity, inclusion, diversity, old, young, but definitely seniors in the whole climate solution. And thank you for that question, as a matter of fact.
And I wanted to just follow up real quick. For the younger generation that wants to get into climate, I can tell you in the Moore-Miller administration, we passed a bill called the Service Year Option, SERVAC. It is the first time in the nation's history that a government is going to fund high school students graduating from high school to have a one-year service year option where they get to have experimental learning for 1 year, where whatever it is that they want to do, whether it's they want to go into education, they're thinking about healthcare, environment, but it's almost like an apprenticeship program. They're going to be taught how to interview at a job, financial literacy, and then we're going to place them in the area that they have the greatest interest in. And the idea is three things. One, they get the hands-on learning so they can kind of decide what it is they want to go into. Two, they get to earn money, and should they want to go and have, go to college, whatever it may be. And three, the most important, is that we want to give them a love and a spirit of service. That Governor Moore and and our administration believe that those who serve together stay together. So individuals, young people coming out of high school, it's a great opportunity for them to work with their peers and to really get the love of government that Administrator Pinsky talked about, that government does a lot of good things. We're here to serve the community. So we believe that this is a great way in which we can bring young people into the process, and we're hoping that they will consider careers in climate change and going into that, whether they want to be attorneys, scientists, manufacturer, trade, doing trade in the area, whatever it may be. So we want young people at the table. We want to hear your voice. And to that, I want to say to everyone that's here, to all the students, that if there is anything that the Moore-Miller administration can do, do not ever hesitate to reach out to us. We're here to serve you. Remember that. So if you have ideas in which you believe that the administration should be looking at to implement, to possibly propose policies on, come to us, share it with us, share it with the great delegates that are here. That's what we're all here for, to hear your ideas. So don't be shy. Come and meet with us, talk with us about the issues that are most important to you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Don Bosch, and for under 5 previous governors, I had the great honor of representing the university system on the Chesapeake Bay Cabinet, and Governor's Chesapeake Bay Cabinet and the Maryland Climate Commission. So I first want to, I've worked with scores of your predecessors. So I first want to say we're so thankful that you stepped up to this. I think I personally have seen that it's a real commitment. It's a sacrifice you make for the good of the state and the good of the people. So I want to thank you for the service. Now, the hard part. You know, we have now this big goal that, thanks to Senator Pinsky and his colleagues, that put us in the leadership to go to 60% reduction by 2031. That's 8 years, right at the end of the second term of this administration. So it's all on you. So the challenge is that plan's one thing. Secretary McElwain's going to have to take the leadership and step up and make a more aggressive plan to meet these new goals. But the hard part, as Senator Pinsky mentioned, is implementation. So as we look at that, if we're successful in moving forward with developing more renewable energy to meet our energy needs, the existing plan will show you, first look, that we still have a big gap, and it's mainly in transportation and buildings. And with those kinds of changes come an interface with personal lifestyles. That you can't drive your single occupancy vehicle, internal combustion engine vehicle anymore. You can't put gas in your new home, and you're going to have to retrofit for old homes. So have you thought about how you can bring the Maryland populace, the public, along with this transition so you don't have the pushback that's going to delay things, and you get people to understand that this actually might make their lives better, because it does affect all of you, transportation, buildings, planning, business, all of those sectors, in all of your departments. Agriculture will have to come along. So have you given much thought and discussion yet about how you bring the public along with us?
I will start by saying, and we can turn it over to you all. Well, first of all, it's not if we will meet the goals. So I just want to make that clear. We will do it. We're going to do it. It's all hands on deck. We can't do it alone. We're going to find the most creative ways to implement the goals. It's going to take partnership from everyone. Businesses, federal government, local government, commissions, everyone. We need everyone on board, and citizens. And we're doing that. We're putting out a lot of information, a lot of marketing, a lot of news. Thanks, Maryland Matters. Really pushing out to the public why we're doing it, why it's important, and why we need you to help. And you're right. So when we push, as an example, when we push the automotive industry to go to zero emission vehicles, that's pushing citizens to respond. We can't make you buy one, but eventually your choices will be limited. You'll have to buy one because we want car makers by a certain year, right? I'm sure you all are familiar with that, to have zero emission vehicles, the sales of them. Anyway, we'll still have gas cars, but selling them by, is it 2035? I'm sorry? Yeah, 2035. I have so many goals. I'm going to meet them, though. Don't worry. So if the manufacturers in this one particular example are selling only zero emission vehicles, then we have to respond to that, right? And so the last point I'll make, and I'll turn it over to my colleagues, is you mentioned the buildings as well and transportation. I'll just speak on the Climate Solutions Now Act. We didn't forget about buildings. That's a part of it. So we're pushing for action. And eventually people, all of us, will have to adhere and be a part of the solution. And they'll be happy they did, because we will have a greener economy and a cleaner environment.
If I could jump on, but first I want to acknowledge Don Bosch. He's sometimes a little too humble. Don Bosch laid the groundwork for the Climate Solutions Now Act. He was my mentor. I used to call him the state scientist. he led the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science on the Eastern Shore for a number of years, and he's internationally respected and known. So, Don, thank you for everything you do. Let me say two quick things. About 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, there was an article in the Washington Post, and it described how a man named Ira Magaziner, who's sort of a big thinker, he was involved in climate change and, in healthcare reform. He went to the owner of the Empire State Building, or the REIT that controlled it. And they were about to do a multi-million, hundreds of millions of dollar renovation of the Empire State Building. And Magaziner said, look, if we get the best scientific minds, the best architects, and we can get a reasonable return on your investment over a X number of years, 5 years, 6 years, whatever it was, would you be willing to do it our way? And he made a convincing presentation, and they said yes. I mean, they redid windows, they did HVAC. They also replaced their elevators and turned them into energy-producing units by the elevator going up and down. And they ultimately got a return on investment quicker than they thought it would be. And when the project was over, and again, it still cost hundreds of millions of dollars, the guy said, Ira Magaziner, he said, why did you come to me? He said, because it's the Empire State Building. And it was to make a point. And I think, and this gets to commerce, this is a win-win situation. I mean, is there an initial outlay of money? Absolutely. But about 3 weeks ago, I was in Montgomery County with the governor at a modest income, suburban, but working class, moderate income apartments and townhouses. And the owner of it put solar on everything. It was the largest moderate income project in Montgomery County. They used the Montgomery County Green Bank. They used tax credits. And the owner said, look, this company's going to stay in my family. I'm going to get a return after however 5, 6 years. And then I'm going to make money. And I think part of the challenge ahead is explain to people it's in your best interest. And so that's one of the positives. I think that goes forward. But on the other side, we do have to change our thinking and our culture. You know, some of us have moved towards electric vehicles, and obviously it's been more so in the middle class than the upper middle class. But car prices have come down, and it shouldn't be a niche product. You know, working families, black and brown, working class families should have the opportunity, but if they're living in, we'll say, West Baltimore, in an apartment building, it's kind of complicated having those chargers if there's not like a parking lot. And we've got to put those challenges front and center to make these innovations and these reforms available to everyone, because we're not going to solve this problem with one simple sector of society. And some have been forgotten, and we have to go out of our way. We have to make an extra effort to make sure these reforms and some of these cultural changes of how we address issues, the lens we use, are much broader than they have been in the past. So I think it can be done. We're going to have to change how we do business. We're going to have to do a lot more education, a lot more initiatives to make sure this happens.
I'm just going to keep it really brief. Your question is great, and we have to hardwire it in. Right. The best way we can do that is to not allow any new buildings or any new infrastructure to be built unless it's meeting these requirements. That hardwires it, because those things are around for a very, very, very long time. And so it gets back to that multiplier effect of everything that we do, every decision we make has to be looking at how do we hardwire this in, particularly when you look at what I hope to be long life of buildings and infrastructure, so that we, design, build, plan that in the right way so that it's lasting and meets all of these goals and helps us with that solution. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. So we knew this was going to happen because I see hands going up, and it's like 3 minutes to 8. So we're going to take one more question from the back there from the person standing with Musa, and then we'll bring Zach up for some closing remarks.
Hello, everyone. My name is Devanshu Mistry, and I'm a freshman chemical engineering student and Sondheim Public Affairs Scholar here at UMBC. So I'm native to Carroll County in Maryland, and as you may know, agriculture is one of the prime industries and uses of land there. So I just wanted to know what the Moore-Miller administration's initiative is for agriculture in environmental policy.
Well, the Secretary of Agriculture isn't here. I'd love to speak about what I want him to start doing. No, I'm kidding. He will get on me so badly after this. Maybe I'll turn that over to you, Lieutenant Governor. I don't want to get in trouble with Josh, the Secretary.
Look, thank you for that question, and I'm so excited to hear. Did you say you're a first-year engineering student?
Yes, I am.
All right. What kind of engineering?
Chemical engineering.
Okay, great. I'm a civil engineer, so always happy to see women and people of color getting into this space. So, kudos to you. So what are we doing from an agriculture standpoint with the Moore-Miller administration? Of course, we have a new secretary, Secretary Addix, who's doing a phenomenal job going around meeting with farmers and hearing what their concerns are. Again, I'm going to keep going back to meeting people where they are and listening to their concerns and not believing that we're the ones that know all the answers, because we don't. We need to hear from the farmers. And I know most recently I went on a tour to an equestrian farm, to a organic farm, and it was one of the most exciting days of the administration, really, because when we went to the organic farm, the farmer there, not only did she give us a terrific organic lunch, but then she took us on the farm, and she literally was picking up plants and dandelions and telling us to eat them. And we did. They were delicious. I had no idea dandelions could be eaten, but apparently you can if you don't put all this pesticide over them. And so I learned a lot from the process, but more importantly, what I'm trying to convey is that Secretary Addix came there with me, along with many other members of the Moore-Miller administration, to understand what the farmers' concerns are. So since you live in Carroll County, and I'm assuming maybe in your family you may have a farm?
No.
You don't? Okay. But is this an area of interest to you?
Yeah, definitely. So
Okay.
I work very closely with the local government in Carroll County, mainly in education policy as their student member on the Board of Ed over
Sure.
the past 2 years.
Yeah.
So I really got to talk to a lot of the people there about what their concerns really are, and local government is a really big interest and passion of mine.
No, thank you for that. I'd love to take this offline with you, and if you would like, I can have you sit together with Secretary Addix, and he can talk to you a little bit more about that, if that's okay with you.
That's amazing. Thank you so much.
Sure.
So we promised these good people we'd get them out of here by 8. So Zach, close us out.
All right. Well, that's a wrap, everyone. On behalf of UMBC, I'd like to thank our excellent panelists here for coming out tonight. Let's give them a round of applause, please. And our moderators, too. So thank you for helping our community learn how your administration plans to help build Maryland's climate future. We know that this is just going to be the beginning of our partnership with you all, and we look forward to working with you to make Maryland a leader in the fight against climate change. Thank you, guys.